So, welcome, welcome. I am really excited to share the world of sacred storytelling with you today, and specifically really interested in focusing on what is it to tell vision stories. So, we're going to have a little emphasis on that. And I do love to begin every class kind of knowing, like, if there's really something specific that you came for, that you really want to understand, in almost storytelling, sacred storytelling. If there's a block or a barrier that you're dealing with, or if you just have a bigger question, place it in the chat box and I will absolutely do my best to weave it into our conversation today. And also, this is going to be interactive. So I know a lot of you are off camera, but if you want to come on camera, storytelling is an interactive sport. Like stories are created bizarrely by the people who are listening to them. And I'll talk a little bit about the science and the magic of storytelling and how that all works. And let us begin. I'd like to begin by greeting you as a storyteller and your vessel, meeting your vessel. And so if you can, give yourself this hour, because we're going to be exploring what are the stories that are running through you. And the more opportunity you have to really listen, not just to your mind, but to the inspiration that wants to approach you at this time. This is kind of the gift of this time that we have together. I invite you to close your eyes and find your feet. Find your feet. They're probably touching the floor, which was once made of something that was alive. So as you breathe in, I'm going to invite you to breathe in that connection to that which is holding you right now, that which is holding you in its original form. So my feet are on linoleum, which I imagine was once upon a time some kind of derivative of plastic, oil, coal. It was probably a plant a long time ago. And it's alchemy. Here it is right now, holding me up. If you're on wood, there's a tree. Can you connect with the tree and its aliveness? In this moment, I invite you to consider all the different roles that you play and all the different alchemy that you've gone through in your life. Parts of you have died, parts of you have lived. And just take a moment to think about all the different roles that you play in your life. Friend, beloved, mother, daughter, enemy, aunt. What are all the different roles that you play in your life? And in this moment, this next moment of breathing in, can you exhale all that out through your feet? And can you imagine a nice bit of waterfall, like light waterfall, just kind of tumbling gently over your body, over your head, over your shoulders and chest and torso and legs, all the way down to your feet, just washing you off, clearing you off all down the back. And as you breathe in, this time breathing in from that top, as if you could breathe in through the top of your head, breathing it all the way down through your body, down into the chair, connecting all the way down to the very bottom of this earth. What is it feeling to be feeling connected? So in this moment, I invite you to attune to your vessel as part of your being about what brought you here today. What brought you here? Are you one of those people that has a story inside of you that is ready to come out and just wants to be told? It's banging around your bones. Are you one of those people that the muse just keeps coming and whispering in your ear and she's like, tell my story, or are you one of those rare people that has come because you want to carry the old stories? You want to learn how to be in relationship to story. I really invite you to attune to, like, what is it that's calling you here so that we can speak to that part of you. And I like to begin something happened. I don't know what happened. This is so weird. I pulled up my webinar straight for you and it just disappeared. I do love using it, so I'm going to find my way back to it. I like to begin with a quote. And the reason why I start with a quote is because it's just like when I take my Tai Chi class, at the end of the class, we bow to the teacher. He always says, "You're not bowing to me. You're bowing to my teacher and to my teacher's teacher." And so as we start each class with a quote, it's like we're like acknowledging all those who've come before us, who have dedicated themselves to the written and spoken word, to the language. And this is the quote that wants to come to you today. My cousin Helen, who is in her 90s now, was in the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. She and a bunch of girls in the ghetto had to do some sewing each day. And if you were found with a book, it was an automatic death sentence. She had gotten hold of a copy of Gone with the Wind, and she would take 3 or 4 hours out of her sleeping each night to read. And then, during the hour or so, when they were sewing the next day, she would tell them all the story. These girls were risking certain death for a story. And when she told me that story herself, it actually made what I do feel more important, because giving people stories is not a luxury. It actually is one of the things that you live and die for. That quote is by Neil Gaiman. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today. I'm going to introduce you into the land of sacred storytelling as a sacred art form and as a healing art. We're going to talk about what is a story, like what is it and what distinguishes a story from a sacred story. We're going to talk a little bit about just the path of the sacred storyteller, like what is it to be someone at that path? And we're going to all along the way really be talking about and weaving in this concept of our responsibility to the future through the stories that we tell, and how to become aware of where our future has become hijacked by different aspects of different kinds of stories. So you're gonna become you're gonna really know how to put your sacred storytelling goggles and be able to see the world through story by the time we're done. And at the end, I will tell you about a couple of different opportunities to be with me. And I wish I could offer you an egg from that rooster. Can you guys hear the rooster? Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, no eggs at the end of this, but lots of background noise. Okay. And all along the way, I will be asking questions, and they're designed to be interactive. And it's like when you guys do participate, it makes it much more delightful for everybody, to be quite frank. Okay. So it feeds our conversation. So a little bit about me is that I was born on a farm in Vermont, and I really began to know storytelling because it was one of my first friends. I was an only child. We lived on 40 acres. It was the time when parents would open the door and say go away and come back, at dinner time. There was no helicopter parenting at that time. It's like none of the craziness of child kidnapping had happened yet. So we had just a lot of wild time. And so I had this opportunity to have a really big imagination and to develop a real relationship with the natural world. And I really remember what it was when all the spring flowers came up and when they got mowed, and being a little kid and having seeing the flowers get taken away. It was a really, look, it's still with me. I began to learn the power of story as kind of like a savior when I soon left that farm. And then my parents separated, and one moved to one state, one moved to the other. I started moving between them. And if any of you have been the new kid in town, it sucks. It just sucks as a little kid. And that was me every single year. And so I have these books, I have these companions that I was able to take with me everywhere. And they were pretty much kind of saved me from that kind of a painful existence at that time. And they also opened up entirely new worlds. They gave me opportunities to learn things I never would have had access to. And I fell in love with John Steinbeck and Albert Camus at too young of an age. I shouldn't have been reading them at that young age, but I did. And they opened up this realm of understanding the world around me. I began to understand the responsibility of storytelling when my best friend in high school committed suicide. And because storytelling and writing had always been my place of sanctuary, that's where I went to process my grief. And in that place, I began to, I wrote a play, and that play ended up winning a spot in a playwriting festival. And I got to bring that story to the world. And that's how I learned that what you put out comes back. In the sense that when I shared my grief, when I shared my confusion, that's what came back. So I understood that there's a relationship, there's a very relational thing of resonance that's happening. And there's a lot of responsibility that happens about what you choose to put it out and how you put it out. I began to learn the business of storytelling when I went off to New York City. At the young age of 18, my parents said, don't waste your time and our money on acting school if that's what you want to do, or on college, if that's what you want to do. And Diana, I'm going to have to ask if you don't mind to turn off your video if you're not still, just because this is the time I get to teach about peripheral vision. So this is how humans got to survive the dinosaurs. You know, our peripheral vision activates and we go into a state of fight or flight. And it actually turns off our critical thinking. It puts us into a reptilian mindset. And so when we're actually watching television, which is a moving image, we don't think and process in the same way as we do when we're reading and when we're listening. So take that in when you think about like, well, all the different kind of information that you're taking in and how it affects you and how your mind is able to process it. And thank you, Diana. I so love your presence here. She's a regular in the realm of sacred storytelling. And it's always also a little fun fact to teach about peripheral vision and how much I love watching you guys and being in conversation while we talk. So my parents, I was very, very lucky, really lucky. They saw that I had a talent and a gift for writing and for theater. And they saw that I wanted to go to acting for it. And they said, don't waste our money on college. If all you want to do is acting, go get yourself into an acting school in New York City. And so I did. And I got to study with some extraordinary legends. And I got to work off Broadway and at Summer Stock. And I learned at a very young age that I was not meant for that business and I didn't want it. But what I did see was that something was really magical that was happening in the room, whether it was a one-woman show in a tiny coffee shop or in a massive off-Broadway theater. There was a magic that was happening in that room. Something happened in the space and I could feel it. And I really wanted to understand what it was that we were creating. And I wanted to capture it. I wanted to like harness that energy rather than just like watch it walk out the door, you know, when it went out, when we opened the door at the end of the show. I ended up going to college. I studied outdoor experiential education. I got deeper into the wilderness studies, and I got a really lucky chance again to integrate performance art into this environmental education. And once again, just seeing that no matter what the format, when we step into this place of story, that it really works. And one of the things that I started to notice was that around the fires. You know, we did a lot of, I worked as a wilderness guide for many years. And when we came around the fire, something happened. Something happened in the sense that we would listen to each other. That when we came around the fire, we came into this place of being human together that I hadn't seen in other places. And I wouldn't actually understand until many years later. That when someone opened their mouths, everyone else assumed that they had something to say and they listened without interruption. And when people speaking awfully had kind of a great story. So it really brought me back to this, like it introduced me to the most ancient way of being together and this technology of what is this story and how it teaches us kind of the 101s of how to be good humans together. It teaches us basics of communication, amazingly enough. So the journey out of college led to getting a master's in social work, led to community organizing. And I had this moment in my life, and it was a big initiatory moment. Maybe I'll tell you guys at the very end. Maybe I'll teach you guys how to make a wisdom story. And what that was that moment was I had a very big initiation moment in my life where I thought I was going to lose my voice. And when that happened, I began to see what I had that I was taking for granted. And it was this moment where it's like, cut all the nonsense, cut all the shoulda, woulda, coulda in life and get straight onto my path. I started my first company, which was called the Performance Initiative, which was all about utilizing the arts for social change. That would lead me to producing large events around political events. I eventually worked for Al Gore and produced and hosted the Green Channel at his television network. And while I was there, I got to see the stats on what people were watching. And I thought that I had this big question. And the question that I was walking with was, what was the information that would lead people to inspiration, to motivation, to activation? Because I understood one of the threads that I'm to weave into this time is that reconnection, that reconnection of the disconnect that's happening between humans and the planet right now. So if I got the people the right information, it would work. But what I saw, looking at all the data, was that people aren't paying attention to the data, that they were paying attention to stories. And when I saw that, it gave me the golden ticket out of the life I thought I was supposed to do to have impact. And it gave me permission to follow where the genius was living inside me. And I don't say that as an egotistical thing. I say that meaning like we all have the genius that lives through us. In Rome, on your birthday, in ancient Rome, on your birthday, they didn't celebrate you. They celebrated the genius that lived inside of you. And so it gave me that permission to say, yes, there's a genius that's living inside of me, and it all is in relationship to story. And so I'm not going to continue on the path, but what I'll tell you is that I did end up going much more into the mystical sense. I did priestess training at the 13 Moon Mystery School. I studied extensively with Stephen Jenkins at an Orphan Wisdom School, and I began to get in relationship with the ancient aspects of language, of story, of culture, and I began to see the connection between what's the disconnect on our planet is actually deeply connected to the disconnect to our relationship to story, which is at its core what helps connect us to being humans and our humanity. That's a little bit about what brings me to you today. So let's start talking about some of those old ways of being. And I can see that somebody had a chat. So the Hawaiians say that, hi Mo, the Hawaiians say that words are so powerful that they can raise enough energy to slow the world or to set it into motion. And the Sicilians believe that words poke holes in the universe. I always think about that when my temperature gets a little bit hot, if I'm in an argument with somebody and it can't ever take it back. Australians say that the stories from the past must be sung to the present in order for the future to exist. And all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I'm going to say that again, because it's like that all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. To me, it's like getting us right to the very core key of what it is to be human. That we have this ancient knowledge that's accessible to us that says, yes, humans play a very, very unique role on this planet. We take spirit, Kotodama is a language, it's a word from Japan, and it speaks to the spirit of a word, that as humans, we take the spirit of a word, we can speak it into being and transform spirit into matter. It's kind of mind-blowing. Look, I dream of making a mug. And I have this imagination, this concept, this vision, and then I shape it into shape. I mean, it's just kind of, humans are amazing. If anyone gets down on humans, I hope that you remember, we are incredible creator beings. Abracadabra, it's one of the most oldest words on the planet, and it means I create as I speak. So as we think about this, I want to invite you to start thinking about, what are the stories that you're hanging out with that are that you're telling at the dinner table, that you're telling about your past, that you're telling about yourself? What are the stories that you're speaking about the future? When you start thinking about, oh, I am one of those people that I am speaking the world into being. How many times have you guys said something not so positive about yourself and someone else believed you? Have you guys ever had that experience? Yeah, I mean, I had to really do a massive retraining of myself where I was insecure about my singing skills. And by the way, I can sing. I'm lucky. I just got the chords for it. But I would go into rehearsal sometime and I'd be like, well, and then all the people that I'd be rehearsing with would just assume that what I was saying was true. and that I couldn't sing, and it's like, oh, right, like we craft people's ideas about us. They will believe us. So we're really not doing any favors when we're speaking our insecurities out into the world. And it's almost an act of discipline to say, is that true? Is that worth my voice to be used in that way? Are there other ways that I can be using my voice to speak to what is happening? And there's a slight piece that I want to introduce here. And I'm gonna introduce it somewhere else. I don't usually talk about it, but I do really want to talk about it today. So if I don't tell you the golden key by the time the end, somebody raise their hand and be like, the golden key, Leah. Okay. So what is a story? Let's just get into that before we go too far in. What is a story? Yeah, Georgie's saying, I've been corporate, but I learned the hard way. You have to be mindful of your own brand. Isn't it bizarre that we're using that language that you put out there, and that it is all about what you say about yourself? It really is, for better or for worse. I remember working with this guy when I was working in the corporate television world, and he really believed in himself. He was such a great teacher for me. He really believed in himself, like really believed in himself. I mean, his ego was like incredibly healthy and well-formed and everything. He believed everything that he could do was going to work and was golden. And everyone believed in him too. Every show that he created failed, and so many people got fired working under him, and then there were so many of us who were like, had really brilliant ideas, but we were so afraid to tell them or say them, and it's like he was a great teacher for me, because I was like, look what happens when you believe in yourself. Other people believe in you too. Look what you put into the world, and that becomes a practice. Okay, so Jack is saying, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. Okay, this is where he's getting that right. The origin, this all comes from these teachings are old and ancient, right? That this is where the origin of, and there was then there was the word. Okay, so what is a story? We're going to get into it. What is a story? That's a question I'm asking you, and there's no wrong answer. You can't get this wrong. It's great. So you can speak it out, or you can put it in the chat box. Georgie's saying it's a particular version of events. A version of events, it's like a story is going to take you somewhere, right? A story it's got, in the Western mindset, a story has a beginning, middle, and end. That's a Western mindset. And indigenous mindset, the story will take you somewhere, but it might not always, it might not give you what you want, in terms of understanding why you went there or what was on the way. Terry says it's a perspective that leads to a growth opportunity. You're talking about a story that has in service. That's like, this is a storyteller that's in service to something. So this is someone, Terry, I love what you're saying. It's like, in this version, you're talking about a story can have a job, and it can have a purpose to do something. Carol's saying that it's a narrative arc that engages emotions, right? So now we're talking about, okay, so it has something inside of it. It's kind of wild, right? Because stats, facts, and figures don't necessarily engage emotions. But when we understand what they mean, now that they matter, now something else. So you're talking about something that evokes our something inside of us. And that it's a gift of knowledge, just as Jennifer. Great. Love that. So that, again, it can be a gift, and someone came to me many years ago in the last webinar. I told this story, so I won't tell it again. But this woman came to me, she said, I'm going to give you a gift. It's a story. And I didn't know that a story could be given away. So these are all absolutely right. There is another way of looking at story too, which is a story. Humans often understand themselves and compare themselves in relationship to the latest technology. So I'll do that. And we can relate story to being an operating system. And within this operating system, we learn our beliefs, our values, what is possible. We often will understand what roles we should expect to play, what we can expect from life. there's oftentimes it will kind of guide us in who to be in the world, how to be, how not to be, warning stories, right? Teaching stories will teach us about, what I love about stories is that there's this opportunity. It is the way that humans get to co-evolve that is beyond our genetics, right? It's how our consciousness gets to collectively co-evolve, okay? Jennifer has some big experience and she's like, well, I'm never going to do that one again because I learned a thing or two and I'm not falling in that pothole. And she shares the wisdom of that, and then I come around to that same pothole and I'm like, well, I don't have to repeat the same thing that Jennifer did because I actually know what's in that pothole and I'm going to break a bone or two. So I'm going to walk around and I'm going to hit that mountain up there and whoops, don't climb that mountain at that time. So I'll share that story. And then when Georgia gets there, she's like, well, I even know what's going to happen there. So I don't have to repeat that again. And I think about this actually around the Me Too movement. Because when the Me Too movement happened and all of a sudden our whole world became flooded with stories, as a storyteller, it was absolutely heartbreaking to me. I mean, as a woman, it was devastating, but as a storyteller, because so many of those stories were the same. And it really made me realize that if more of us had told our stories, then other people would have had more access, more information, more opportunity to understand where they could say no, or all the different ways of being. So it's so important that we share our stories, especially the ones that we're ashamed of. And there's so much beauty in being able to change those stories into medicine, into wisdom stories. And that's where they become this great gift, an extraordinary gift, where it's a giveaway, because we're never the same person we were when any of those things happened. We're changed by them, but we become changed by them by how we tell the story. So in particular, when we run into those stories that are particularly hard or challenging or traumatic, it's really important not to tell them the same way over and over and over again. Can't tell you how important that is. It's really important to be able to tell them, to be in a witness circle. I don't know why I'm telling you, someone must need to hear this. So this is not on my agenda for talking today, but stories come out, they get drawn out by people, but I'll talk about a little bit on the journey of working with a story from a traumatic, painful, suffering experience into a healing one. So the first thing is allowing yourself to be witnessed in what happened. And that process is so important. And we understand that. And this is a basic thing that happens in the truth and reconciliation world. Also, we've seen this as a major aspect of healing, that people need to be witnessed and heard. This is not being questioned. This is not being pumped for more information. This is just being heard. So if something happens or someone near you has had something really upsetting, you can offer them a witnessing circle, and you can say, I will happily witness what happened. Not that you're going to carry it for them or hold them or do any of that, take on the pain. That's not what a witnessing circle is. It's literally being a witness and witnessing someone else's experience. Then there's this point where it begins to change and shift as a storyteller. And that's when we can look at it and we can change the shape and form, and we can say, look at it through the eyes of an initiation. Okay. Some aspect of life has initiated us, perhaps with or without our consent. And when we come to initiation, there's certain aspects, things get taken away from us. We are shown or we're given an opportunity where an aspect of our own strength might be called out in where it might not have been called out in any other way. And then a gift will often emerge. Now, this only happens if we have the context, right? Otherwise, we can be just sitting around getting banged around by life in a lot of suffering. But if we don't have the context to look at it as rites of passage, if we don't have the context to get our hands on the story and start working it and start really seeing and reflecting and experiencing and telling it in different ways, like we started this whole thing about people will see us based on how we tell them about ourselves. If we say I'm a battered, I got victimized by life, then people are always going to see us as a victim. I'm poor. I'm always poor, scarcity, scarcity, scarcity. People will always see us as poor and scarcity, And so if we are able to say, there was a time that this happened, or, it's like there's so many ways that we can work with our language, because all the time we're casting spells. That's how powerful we are. There's this beautiful poem. I'm going to read it to you right now because it just talks about this magical time in life. It goes like this. In the very earliest time, when both people and animals lived on Earth, a person could become an animal if he wanted to, and an animal could become a human being. And sometimes they were people and sometimes animals, and there was no difference. All spoke the same language. That was the time when words were like magic. The human mind had mysterious powers. A word spoken by chance might have strange consequences. It would suddenly come alive, and what people wanted to happen could happen. All you had to do was say it. Nobody could explain this. That's the way it was. That is translated from Inuit by Edward Field. And so just because we've forgotten that we're powerful beings does not mean that the words have forgotten. And so just a piece of that. Okay, so Diana is offering some counseling down there. Yes. Okay, so we got our hands around a story. We got our hands around the responsibility of it. What's a sacred story? What distinguishes a sacred story? What makes it different? There's no wrong answer. Jack is saying, negative produces more negatives, positive gratitude. Yes, more thanks. George is saying a story that holds deep meaning for an individual or group. So there's something in it that has like, people kind of hold on to it. It has meaning, right? It's a value. Sacred story has value. I love that. Terry's saying a story that brings to others a liberating resource, right? I think about that. Like when I hear a sacred story, I feel alive. I feel a little juiced. I feel inspired. Maybe my heart's opened. Maybe I've touched some grief that I haven't been able to access. It's like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to exercise more tomorrow and maybe I'll quit sugar. It's like, I feel more alive and like a really good, I want to be a good human, Jennifer says it's timeless, right? There are these stories that we can tell that live, that they're not attached to a time. I love that. They have a universal teaching inside of them. Absolutely. So one way of thinking of sacred, and when we look at what does sacred mean, the easiest, shortest route to this conversation, I would say, is that we're talking about something that has a life force in it, that we're recognizing that the divine lives within it when we call it sacred. There's that sacred mountain. We're saying, it's got a little extra juice over there. There's got an extra life form in it, right? So it's like when we're saying it's a sacred story, we're saying, I honor that there's life that serves life. That's how I personally distinguish it, that it's a story that's in service of life. And so it's doing something, and it has a spirit inside of it. So when I'm telling a sacred story, it's a collaboration. It's a collaboration between me and the spirit of the story. They say that myths are the earth speaking out loud. So to be a myth teller, you are a human that's giving voice to the earth. And when I think of a sacred story, the best way I can think of it is I think there's common agreement that in this body, a soul resides. And how I've come to understand sacred storytelling is that, the story, the body of the story is the vehicle that spirit lives inside of. And spirit can speak to us through story. So when you go to the land of story, you got to speak its language. Just like, you go to France, you're going to speak French. You go to Spanish, you're going to speak Spain. You go to the land of story, you got to speak myth. You got to speak archetypes, symbol, and metaphor. They say that metaphor is the language of spirit. So I want to invite you to start really looking around at these stories that you're surrounded by and be like, is this a sacred story? Is this a story that's bringing me closer to myself, to others, to feeling in communion and connection, to feeling alive, to feeling the spark and the vibrance of life? One of my favorite sacred stories is Life is Beautiful. So a sacred story does not have to be happy, happy, joy, joy. Has anyone seen that movie, Life is Beautiful? Kind of old, yeah. It takes place in the Holocaust. It takes place, wouldn't think of that it's like a happy story, but it's a profound story. It's a beautiful story. And so these sacred stories, they can take us to the darkest corners of life, but they will always guide us out. And with it, we'll have what you were talking about, more wisdom, more tools on how to meet the world, more guidance. In Welsh, the etymology of storyteller is a guide between the worlds. So if we know what a sacred story is, right, a sacred story has the potential to heal the storyteller and the listener. Yeah, absolutely. And I always like to be very careful when I say that, because one time I was introduced to saying Leah is going to raise your consciousness. I was at this event and I was like, oh God, it's like, I will not be doing anything to you. As a storyteller, we create a beautiful field, and what you do in your consciousness is your business. And that's one of the things that I love about storytelling, is because we are in the temple. We're in the temple of our being, right? And it's private there. And when we share a story, we're given an opportunity to explore our consciousness, the privacy of our consciousness, while being in communion and connection to others. It's kind of an amazing experience. Okay, so the opposite of a sacred story, zombie stories. Oh, bummer, right? Zombie stories, they're death eaters. They're feeding on us, right? And so an example of a zombie story, it's like, think about the TV shows you're watching. Think about the movies. Think about when you watch them. Do you feel inspired, or do you feel afraid? Or do you feel like they inserted do you feel a little bit more depressed, or like maybe you don't want to get up the next day because life kind of sucks because people act like that? Think about what you are nourishing your consciousness with. What kinds of stories are you feeding your consciousness with? Because those you carry into your dream time, and it affects what you think of as possible in our world, whether you're consciously thinking about it or not. That's the library that you're giving your consciousness to call upon. And so when we think about a zombie story, an example of it, just to get super concrete, is Jaws is an example of that. So in terms of Jaws, it was written by Peter Benchley. It was picked up by Steven Spielberg. It was one of his first big blockbuster hit, And what do we know? We want to understand a story. We have to know where it comes from, the land that it was written from, and what the storyteller was in service to. I don't know Peter's full story, but I do know that Spielberg really wanted to become a famous director. They made a big Jaws, a big metal Jaws. It broke. It was the first movie ever filmed out in the open ocean. Whether or not you speak the language of symbols, the language of symbols speaks you. What does ocean represent? Our emotions, our consciousness. So they take this big story about Jaws. What is Jaws? It's all about killing people, right? Sharks killing people. It takes the greatest and oldest fear that humans have, fear of death. We know this from the oldest story that we've ever had. Gilgamesh tells us that one of our oldest fears that humans have is of our fear of death. And then it plants it and infuses it into the shark by showing it happening in the ocean. And again, you have to understand, like now where so many people are so numb to all this stuff because we're so inundated by media. But you got to think about those people. I think it was back in the 70s, right? We weren't seeing the amount of violence at that time. It was all very new. And all of a sudden, this is planted, and all of a sudden, sharks are seen as the demons of the planet. And this mass thing about people, being able to do mass kill-offs. Maybe demons of the planet was a bit extreme, but they were definitely, like a lot of people, thought them as being really bad. What do we know about sharks? Is that they're a keystone species to the survival of the ocean, that the ocean is key to our own survival. What do we know about the majority of most sharks? Is that they're about as dangerous as a dog. that more people get killed by coconuts falling out of trees than sharks every year. And so when Peter Benchley discovered what his story had done to the mass consciousness of people around the globe, he spent the rest of his life trying to being an ocean steward and taking care of the oceans. So I say this as a cautionary tale, because I don't think that there's a bunch of bad people out there. I don't think that there's bad people trying to tell dangerous stories. I think that it's really important to understand what is their motivation for telling that story. And is it to bring healing for this world or something else? And so as storytellers, you are one of the most powerful people on the planet, because you're the garden, as story listeners, you are the garden that those stories are being planted into, but they can't be planted in there without your consent. So that's the kind of amazing thing. It's like, it's in that place of gift, giving and receiving. And if you don't receive the gift, it has nowhere to live. No story can be carried unless there's a listener that continues it on. So a little bit about storytelling. And I'll show you a couple of things about, how storytellers work in the world and the journey of a sacred storyteller. And okay, I'll show you this. So in terms of what does it mean to be a sacred storyteller? I gotta tell you, I'm just gonna break it to you right now. You're already a sacred storyteller. It's like you can't help yourself but be a storyteller. But are you doing it with intention? That's what we really want to talk about, especially when we're building our future. So, it's like, and I'll just say this piece. This was the piece I was going to talk about before. It was that when we speak our world into being, the way that I was learned how to pray, and granted, I know that word can be so evocative for so many different people. But I'm going to invite you just to listen to the wisdom teaching that I was taught that comes through prayer, is that you're always praying for what you're asking for. Okay. I'm praying for blue skies. I'm praying for clean oceans. I'm praying for well-fed children. I'm praying for happy families. I'm praying for prosperity for all beings, right? I didn't say I don't want any war, right? Because what was the language that just came out? War. So you want to pray for what you are calling for. That's the power of the technology of that. And so when we're thinking about our vision stories, when we're thinking about our future, there's this moment where we could be, and there's a lot of spell casting. There's a lot of saying that this is going to happen. That it's not, it's possible. It is absolutely possible that based on how things have been going, that things might eventually look like that. But one of the unsung heroes of our time, well, actually he's pretty well sung, is Paul Hawken, who has a project called Project Drawdown. He said what's missing from the climate conversation is that we have all the stats and facts that show us if things go wrong, and not enough that add up all the goodwill that's being put into place, all the new organizations, all the new vision, all of that. And we need those images and pictures of everything goes right based on what we're doing. So that call for life, I just want to invite that into your world as you think about what are you talking about in the future? Okay, so in terms of the journey of the sacred storyteller, you got to court the muse. You really do. And part of courting the muse is creating some psychic silence, some silence in your mind. Some people call that meditation. I call it clearing up the clutter. And if it's too busy in there, then you can be surrounded by muses. I got an image this morning because inspiration has just started coming to me nonstop lately. And it's so fun to be back in the land of inspiration. And for a few moments there, I lost it. And I'm one of those people that I've been inspired most of my life. But I got so busy with the doing of things that my brain was crammed and the muses couldn't get in. And I could totally imagine like there were all these muses that were like yelling at me, but there was like no space for them to get into the vessel. And so part of, being able to be in that kind of sacred relationship with the spirit of a story where you get inspired. And this is where it's beautiful when you're telling a wisdom story. What did we talk about? That it has this universal wisdom inside of it so that your story becomes bigger. It becomes a sacred story. because it becomes about us. And this happens when you allow that inspiration to come in and you're like, oh, wow, I'm so much smarter than I thought I was when I tell the story, and it's because, wow, that muse, that inspiration, that guidance that comes through can be really inspiring, not only to you, but to others too. So somewhere along the way, you're going to bump into your barriers. I love these moments. And it's really important to name and claim them. And I think of this sort of as the upgrade moment. It's like if you played Pac-Man, I'm dating myself here, but you get to the end of the game, and then you upgrade to the next level, right? And a block and barrier to me is just like that. It's some initiatory moment that's saying you got to up your skill level before you can continue. But there's something inside of you that needs to be addressed before you're ready to go on to the next stage. And so these blocks and barriers are wonderful things. And I love to work with them and align with understanding what they're trying to say to you. So when you get a block and a barrier, this is a quick thing. And this came to me from one of my most beloved, he's no longer with us anymore, teachers, Randy Straudeman. He was an incredible director. And he would call it the bathroom effect, where if you're stuck and you can't think of what to do next, you just get up and go to the bathroom, and you always come back inspired. And it's just like, it's just like anything, just move the energy, and it's amazing what happens. You got to look behind you. You got to understand the stories that made you. You have to understand your own creation stories. You have to understand the stories, the place that you live. This guides you in understanding the world that you're in. And then you also have to look within the stories that created you. Where did you get your self-confidence from? Where did you get your belief in what's possible? Whose shoulders are you standing on ancestrally? And are there stories that you want to put down and put to rest? It's really fun to explore your storyteller archetype. We all have different archetypes in terms of we're all in service to different things. And once you understand that, it sort of amplifies the potency of your storytelling. So if you know that you're just here to share love, love is going to come through every story that you tell, because people are going to feel it. It doesn't even have to be a love story. It can be about a buttercup and a feather. They're going to feel your love. And that is like that comes to standing in the power of your gift. The more you understand what your true gift is, and we do that a lot in our classes as we get to the core of that. It becomes this like this great gift that you can't help but share through your stories. And it's also your true presence that you're giving away. In these classes, you got to, at some point, you got to develop your skill and craft. Now, look, you're gonna look at this, and a lot of other people that go through, professional training programs, they say, well, at the beginning, where the muses, that's where you develop your skill and craft. But I was really lucky, and I actually got to study with very different kinds of teachers. And through really attuning to my own vessel first, I got at a very young age to build a lot of confidence. A lot of different schools will teach skill and craft first. And if you don't do it exactly according to the teacher's way, that's where so many great, beautiful people have gotten like their egoic creativity gets murdered at too young of an age, because it gets bashed around and they don't get to come into their own true genius and brilliance. So that's why it's further down here, because I really think you actually have to get attuned to your own instrument, understand how it works, and understand what wants to come through you, and then apply some more of the skill and craft. And then the rest of this is like more getting into how do you go into the mythos, listening for what's needed around you. That's really an advanced attunement for as a storyteller. You're like, what are the kind of stories that people are really needing right now? And then there comes to the point where you have the skill to change a story. This is a real magical skill that storytellers have, where we can do these flips. You think it's one thing, but really it's another. And that's a whole other aspect of alchemy and transformation. And so I'm going to stop there for that right now. Are there any questions that people have so far? No. Okay. I'm trying to think of, should I give you a story? Should I give you a story? Do you want a story? Is that where we are? Are you ready for an end? But also, we could also just come to the ending. How about I do this? I'm going to tell you a little bit about the School for Sacred Storytelling and what's coming up. And then for those who want to stick around for a story at the end, I'll share a little wisdom story. And oh gosh, the journey of what you that whole that entire journey is sort of what I think of is like on your way to getting skill and craft. But I think before skill and craft, I think it's really important to understand how your instrument works. So it's like we're all different instruments. You might be a flute, I might be a drum, and it's like, and it's really, I think part of the greatest opportunities, challenges, gifts is to understand, how does this instrument work? What does it need? And as you come into that, then you understand, well, what are the stories that want to be told through me, and how do they get told through me? And then you do want to do skill and craft, because there's going to be what you do automatically with just your gift. But then, like any musician, you want to do your scales. And why do you do your scales on the piano? So that you can get more range. And so you don't get stuck doing the same thing your whole life, and that you become a very expansive, creative person that continues to inspire yourself in your own process, because who wants to do the same thing over and over and over again? So it's a little bit of an answer to that. So what's coming down the pike is vision stories. This is one of my favorite classes. So we set out, I put together this program, which was that goes through 5 different storytelling modalities. And here we are at the vision stories modality. I don't know any other program that teaches this. And it really came from a truly inspired place where I was sick and tired of seeing people get down in the doldrums of what our future is looking like, and so what this class is, it's not like any other storytelling class, where it teaches you a very, very specific technique and modality that you can then share with others. So this is like really, it's great for speakers, it's great for coaches, for therapists, for and for teachers, for trainers. It's for people who like work with a lot of other people. This will give you a very tangible tool for your toolbox. And also, if you're just someone that really wants to understand how to get a hold of your dreaming capacity, how to really have a really healthy, strong relationship with your mythic imagination. But really, if you want to touch into your visioning skills, because that's part of what we're going to be doing, is we're going to get to visit the future through this high technology of our imaginal reality. And we're going to be able to see what happened over there if it all goes right. Then we're going to get to come back and tell people the story. So some of it is that you really get to work on your visionary skills. So you don't have to think of yourself as a visionary person. You might be a visionary person. You're like, oh, I want to really attune this. Or you might be thinking of yourself as someone who, I want to really build those visionary skills. You're going to have a lot of opportunity to practice that. You also have an opportunity to, one of the things I love and is so much fun is when you really get to tap into a collective genius for better solutions. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing in this class is, oh, okay, how do we look at our collective and really call out the genius that's among us? And so we'll be doing that in the class as well. You're going to get to really, it's like, get out of the doldrums of life, so also if you're in a place where you're just kind of in the doldrums and feeling, oh my God, the future, the economy, the climate, and you're just wanting something to like give you a little pep in your step and be like, leave you with a smile and real like a grounded and rooted hope in what we're able to do as humans. This class will give you that too. And the thing that to me it is really key and why I was particularly inspired to teach this particular course is because it goes right back to what I was talking about at the very beginning, in terms of that this ancient teaching is that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. And to me, this being able to tell a vision story, like a real vision story, is the magic golden key out of the nightmare of these times. And I really do think that we're living in dangerous times, not just because of what's happening, but because what we're saying is going to happen inevitably. And it's just not true. And so when you understand your power as not just a storyteller, but also as a story listener, it's like this is why I love getting to be a sacred storyteller. I got the golden key to how to navigate these times. And yeah, you get to reclaim your vision of the future and share it with others. So it's a super fun class. I will give you the link right now. And for anyone who registers today, I offer a special gift. And that is a free copy of my 5 recipe books for how to create 5 different storytelling modalities. So my incredible, she used to be called the alchemist of all good things. She was an amazing, known as a virtual assistant, but she was so much more Katie. She was like, Leah, that should be 5 books. And I was like, I know, but I'm just going to put all the recipes in this one little guidebook. So you get to have that. Was this recorded? Yes, it was. So that says that is Vision Stories. And again, for everyone that registers for that, today you get a free gift of that ebook. And then in terms of other things that are happening in the school, if you're encouraged in the realm of desire, is that we also have Cantadora. And I'm going to show you this really fast because there's a unique opportunity at this moment as well, which is, that Australian saying where the stories from the past must be sung to the present in order for the future to exist. Well, we're going to be telling those future stories. Whoops, did I freeze? Hello, looks like I froze. So I was saying that the old stories from the past must be sung to the future the old stories must be sung to the present or in order for the future to exist. So here we have these vision stories. And I talked a lot about this, and so I gave this to you. The other pieces that I'll just mention is that right after Vision Stories comes Cantadora. And this is the last class of this whole year-long program. And I won't be teaching again for a while. And so this course is all about how to carry old stories. And it's the only class that we teach like this, where you're not telling your own story. And it's really fun because you get to hear all these stories from around the globe. And so it's like, to me, it's like my storytelling self just gets all excited because, there's nothing quite like it, where you get to hear so many stories from so many different places be carried into the now. And that's a really special opportunity. And so when you register for both of them, you get them both at a reduced price. You get $100 off of each class. So that is there also to tell you. And then the last thing that I'll tell you is that I'm teaching one of my favorite classes, which is a one-day class called Myth, Magic, and Medicine. And Myth, Magic, and Medicine is kind of like the foundational curriculum that I base all of my teaching on. And it really comes from how it all started, really, in terms of how I started teaching. And this is going to be a one-day class on March 18th. And this class is all about really understanding your stories. We began to do that a little bit, but we'll get really deep into you and your personal journey. You'll get to understand yourself as a magician, someone who can change a story and really get to experience that, and also how to share your medicine. So that journey that I told you about, you get to do all of that in one day through Myth, Magic, and Medicine. So that is what is coming up. And again, I'll just give you this link so you can play. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, sorry, were you putting links in the chat? Because I can't see anything.
I did put links in the chat. You're not seeing them? That's so weird. I'll try again. You seeing that?
They're at the very top of the chat, not the bottom, for those who are looking.
Oh, that's so
Got
weird.
it. Thank you. Yeah, it's come through at the top. Thank you.
Okay. I've never known Zoom to do that before.
It looks like it's a timestamp that's done it.
Oh, okay.
I have a question, Leah.
Yes.
Dear Leah, fabulous storyteller Leah that I love so dearly.
Thank,
I did you record this? Because there was so much in it that I want to hear again and write down more.
I did record it, and I'll be sending it very soon after we meet today.
Great. I loved it. I loved it.
Oh,
Thank you
good.
so much.
Always love having you and sharing this time with you, Diana.
Thank you.
Mhm. The one last thing I'll mention, and then I'll give you a little story for those who want to stick around and hear this little story, is that the online realm we're going to be building the School of Sacred Storytelling in a very different way and bringing on a lot of different gifted storytellers and storytelling teachers. And I'm going to be doing more in-person retreats. And one of them is coming up in May. And this is a retreat called Initiate. And it's all for women who really want to experience that rites of passage, the technology of rites of passage, and didn't get to have those changes in their own lives really properly acknowledged. So we're actually going to Crete. I'm partnering with 2 other amazing women, and we're having this opportunity to really take that time and to create a ceremony that's individually created just for you, that acknowledges that aspect of yourself that you're allowing to release and surrender while you're truly claiming the archetype that you are becoming. We're all in different stages of life, and we're having women who are claiming their relationship to their sexuality. We're having young mothers who are being acknowledged for being mothers. We're having crones who are saying, I don't want to be a crone, I want to be creatrix, and they're claiming that. So it's a really beautiful multi-generational experience. So if you want more information on that, just email me at info@leahlam, and I'll be doing an information session, I think this weekend. Okay, here's a story. Haven't told the story in a very long time. This story begins with a tapestry that was hanging in my bedroom wall when I was a very young child. And my mother was a painter. She still is a painter. And she was surrounded by lots of artists. And so they would give lots of different things. I don't know what that picture is, but you're showing me a picture of something. Somebody wonderful. I don't know who that is. I'm sorry. And on that tapestry was this woman that was giving flowers away. And it said, give what you have, Leah. She'd actually embroidered, my mom's friend had embroidered my name into it. So I really paid attention. It said, give what you have, Leah. To someone else, it may mean more than you dare to think. And I had no idea what that meant as a little kid. I just had no idea. I was like, what? Give what you have to someone else. It may mean more than you dare to think. But I read it enough times that it stayed in my mind for many years. And life went by, and love came into my life. And I was a late bloomer when it came to love, but I fell madly in love with this man. And we thought we carried similar visions for the future. And at one point we were, waking up in the morning, and I was telling him my dreams. And I really wanted to write this little book. And he said, you can't do that. I have this idea of creating this play. He's like, you can't do that. I said, I want to go to Yale for playwriting. He's like, oh, you definitely can't do that. And it's great because in storytelling, when we hear things 3 times, it's like they really sink in. And I really got that I was with someone that was telling me that I couldn't do or pursue my dreams. And he spoke the greatest fear of all, the greatest fear. He's like, if you go do that, you're never going to make enough money to survive. And I know what you're probably thinking, that he's the bad guy. Maybe you're thinking that, maybe you're not. I was at that time. But really what happened was that he was speaking a fear that also lived inside of me. And I listened to that fear. And I listened to that fear, and it carried me all the way to Richmond, Virginia, away from where I loved the place most, and to study to get an MSW, Master's in Social Work, because that would be the safe degree to get. I would always be able to get a job. And it was a good degree. I learned a lot. I learned a lot that I really appreciate and I really value, and is really driven and informed my work. So I'm very grateful for it. But it was also a little bit like a nightmare for me. And I'll never forget, it was a nightmare because I was like a fish out of water. This was not how my life had been going. This was not the dream of my life. And I'll never forget the night before I went to school. The first night I had this dream, and this dream was that I was in this, like, I was walking down the street, and there was like this girl with a backpack. I'd been working as a wilderness guide that needed some help, and I was trying to help her. And then there was this guy on a cart, and on a horse-driven cart, going down the center of Richmond, Virginia, and he yells at me, and he yells, "Follow your heart." But it was too late. I was registered, I was signed up, I'd paid. And so I went and did that. In the last semester of school, I was sitting there. I had interviewed for a job that I was recommended for. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, if I take this job, it's going to kill me. And I placed my hand on my neck, and there was a huge swelling there. And I said, "I'm so sorry, I have to stop this interview right now and get to a doctor." And I got to a doctor, and within 10 days, I was on the surgery table because I had an extreme case of thyroid cancer that had started spreading very, very quickly. And what looked like a curse turned out to be a blessing, because while I hated being in Richmond and at that school, it turned out that I was at the best medical system in the entire country, where they developed the kind of test to identify my specific kind of cancer. It was an incredible gift, and I ended up with incredible doctors. But there was one thing that happened, which is that when they diagnosed me on that day, he looked at me and he said, "You need to know something." You know, and they put a big contract, just so you know, when you sign, if you haven't dealt with this, like when you're about to get an operation, it's like they put this contract right in front of you, and they're like, sign, it's like you're signing your life away. And I'm looking through it. And he says, "You should know something, that we're going to cut across your larynx, and you could lose your voice." And there was something that was happening in that moment, because before that moment, I had, through the series of different aspects of life, had really understood what it was to be and feel like a victim of life. And I had filled out that archetype very, very well. And it had been almost a survival mechanism, because when there were times when I wasn't able to get the attention that I needed, I learned how to do it by playing the role of the victim. I had gotten so sewn into my being that I didn't know how to separate it from myself. I could out victim story anybody in the room. It was like a sport. And all of a sudden, this guy is telling me that I could lose my voice. This guy is telling me I could lose my voice. And it's like he's coming to me with this like purple pillow, this purple velvet pillow with a tiara of victimhood, and he's offering it to me. And like something in my soul just came online. And it's like this window opened, and I jumped out, and I was like, no more, no more. And when he told me that I could lose my voice, what came out was this new aspect of myself. She didn't know the lines of this new story, but she showed up and she said, "I bet you tell that to all the pretty girls, don't you?" And he was like, "Did you just crack a joke?" And I was like, and that became my new job. I began to make jokes rather than feel sorry for myself, rather than encourage other people to feel sorry for myself. My new job was to start making jokes. Every person, every nurse practitioner I worked with to have my blood, checked and all that. Let's make a joke. Let's laugh. Let's make this fun. And so on one hand, a high functioning coping mechanism. On another hand, I was learning a new script, and I was shifting. This moment was a great initiation of my life. And something in my soul was coming online that and took advantage of the moment and said yes. I can't tell you how it happened. I can't tell you exactly how it happened. I just know that there was a moment and something in me came on. And I can't tell you that it was easy either. It was really hard. I laughed all my way up to the operation. I was able to laugh my way out of the operation. And then I went into a deep, deep, deep depression. And I remember, I'll never forget the day when I was walking outside and I saw this shadow from the leaf. And I remember that seeing things like that used to bring me pleasure, but now the whole world was in black and white. And when I came out of the operation, they gave me the wrong kind of meds and they put me on speed, which I didn't realize. None of us knew that quite yet. And I had all this energy and I gathered my friends and I was like, let's make let's make a garden. Like, we'll make a 70-foot circular garden. And they're like, Leah, you're crazy. You just got out of the hospital. I'm like, I don't know. I got all this energy. Let's use it. So we did. We got together and we made this 70-foot spiral garden. And that garden is what saved my life. Because every morning I would walk into that garden with my gratitude. And I did not know what gratitude was. It was not trending. Oprah hadn't talked about it. I had no idea. That land, that earth, that garden taught me about gratitude. And every day I walked out with my prayers for this life. And I do believe it was those prayers that brought me to this moment to be with you. So may you use the gifts that you have and use your voice and use your stories in good ways. And it's a pleasure to be with you today. And maybe weave again in one way or another. And if this inspires you, wonderful. And if you want to share it with others, I really always appreciate that. And you can take yourselves all off mute and say farewell. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Yes, it was really beautiful and inspiring.
Good.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. It was just
Thank you.
really marvelous.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good to see everyone.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. Take good care.
You too. Bye.